Hi, everyone. Welcome to Creative Careers Leadership Lab. I am Isis Avalos, and I am directing the dance theater portion of this. And we have reached workshop number 3. It's our last workshop. So for me, I'm very interested to know, what are you learning about yourself and so far in this process? You're reaching towards the end of the journey that we've set forth these last 3 months. And so one of the things that I had pointed out was working as a collective. And although we tend to think collectively that it's about everyone in the group, which it is, a lot of how the energy, the spirit of the collective is formed is by how you show up individually to make the team, right? So a lot of this has to do with how you're showing up for yourself, number one, and then two, how you're showing up for others, and also what you're learning about yourself. Do you like to take the leadership in this group? Do you like to take sort of the follower role in this group? Which I also wanted to touch note on that. I'm just going to use like a salsa metaphor reference for this, but in salsa dance, I don't know if some of y'all have experience with that, but you need that resistance, right, between your partnership. And traditionally in the roles of the salsa dancers, you have a leader and a follower. And the thing about being a leader is that there is no leader if there's no follower, right? And so even if you think you could take leadership, if you have no one to follow, then there's no leadership whatsoever. So in essence, the follower also has leadership in their role. So just think of how you've been showing up for yourself and for your group as you are working through this collectively. So I'm pulling this from workshop number 1. This is one of the steps that we went through. And so I'm using step 4, and we'll be using step 5 to kind of pull from all of these marked points so that we can elaborate more on all of this, where we hopefully are now in the finalizing of this project. So we're gonna talk about what does it look like to get the feedback process going, the showings, the run-throughs, how are you working with music? How are you incorporating text if you're not? Hopefully I can be sharing some tools, any helpful information that can really, work towards the building up of your project. And again, of course, finalizing the piece. So run-throughs. Hopefully by now we are beginning to play more a little bit with what you have. You should have a little bit more of a fuller content than you did the last workshop. And so with what you have, sort of the narrative that you have going for the characters in your piece, the movers, the movement itself, you want to start to already have some run-throughs. So there's no specific way to do run-throughs, but a way that I like to use run-throughs is I'll start with a rough run. So let's say, you have a duet or a trio or a group. You can just say, all right, everyone, we're going to run a rough run. So this means truly you're just marking the steps for your memory. It's all like just kind of soaking in where you are spatially and for your memory, right? To just remember. So not expected to do full out movement, full out gestures and role portraying, but it's just mainly just mapping everything out essentially. The soft run is you would start to incorporate the actual choreography with the cues and all the movement motifs, and you would use, like, let's say for example, we're going to do this at 50%, and that means like 50% energy wise. And then, and I do mention this because in specifically in dance theater, there is a certain allotted space or amount of energy, physical energy and strength that we use when we do run-throughs. So, can't be doing like 4 run-throughs at 100% because we're going to gas ourselves out, right? So wanting to also be aware of if it's dance heavy, if there's like a dance heavy section, or if the whole piece is mainly dance heavy, definitely go for a soft run. You can even start off with a soft run and then go into a straight full run. But I bring in soft run just so that you can be able to gauge where you all are at. Again, this would be a perfect moment to work collectively and democratically. So like, hey, where is everyone at right now? Can we do a soft run, or should we do a rough run first? Or are we ready to do a full run, you know? So full run means 100% full out. The biggest comparison from full run to soft run and even rough run is that in full run, you won't be stopping the music. You won't be stopping to, if a performer forgets a part, okay, let's do it again from this, you know, go back a couple of cues and do it again. The full run is just from beginning to end. You don't stop. Even if you forget a section, if you forget something specifically, don't, you know, make the gestures like, oh, I forgot, you know, unless you want to like creatively make that work into your piece. But this is sort of to kind of just get your mind going like, okay, let's pretend that there's an audience watching us. And this is like, you know, fully how I'm showing up as the artist, the mover, the actor in this run through. So just keep swimming, I would say, truly, for the full run through. So I hope those 3 versions of run throughs can help you as you're working up your way to really to open up the space for a showing. So a showing is basically you're going to have a showing of what you currently have, right? What you've built your piece to be. So it's basically, I would say, a formal rehearsal or an informal show. Let's lean more on the rehearsal, like an informal rehearsal. So you're not expected to wear costumes or have full lighting and like specific sound, like speakers or anything like that. You're just having a rehearsal, but hopefully you can set up a date and time. And of course, it would be ideal if your teacher can be there to be one of your audience members. If you can invite other mentors, teachers, colleagues in the department or in your school, or even like, let's say you have a sibling who's like professionally working as an artist, or a cousin or whatnot, and they can come and be form as part of the audience in the showing. So so you would schedule this. I don't know how you would want to talk to your teacher about this, maybe after school or during the classroom time. But essentially, you would be showing the work from beginning to end as a full run through. So this would be the full run through, and now you have actual audience members. And the reason to have for this showing is that so you can actually set up a feedback session afterwards. So it would be a great time to, you know, before you start your showing, to thank your audience members for coming and to, you know, stick around because you do want to have a feedback session, because, you know, we'd love to hear from you all. We've been working on this for 3 months and we're excited to show you all our work in progress. So thank you for coming and enjoy blank working title or your title that you've already decided on. So for your opening up of the feedback space, definitely have pen and paper. I tend to have, when I'm working on a piece, I tend to just have a notebook where I, from beginning to end, have the beginnings of, you know, what I started conceptually thinking about my piece. And then even here, I would write my notes on what the feedback is. I actually made you all a template for feedback, and it's called the critical response process template, which I will explain to you what that is, but just know that you do have that as a resource. Second option would be to have a voice recorder. You can, I went ahead and linked you all to an app that you can use. I have it, but one main thing with this is that you cannot use this voice recorder unless you have permission from everyone in that space, including the performers and your audience members, that it is okay for their voice to be recorded. So you can just stand there and say, hi, you know, but before we start, you know, after you did the showing, the actual performance, the full run through, you say, we're about to start a feedback. we do want to use voice recording if that's easier for you all to notate or keep track of your notes. Is everyone comfortable with having their voice recorded? And if there is someone in the audience that says, oh, sorry, I'm not comfortable, then you have two options. You can either opt out of using the app, the voice recording app, or you can just say, great, make sure that you don't, to the audience member, you would say, if you want to refrain from speaking, that's great. And then would love to hear your feedback afterwards. Would love to meet with you one-on-one, depending on obviously who is speaking. This point would be one of the artists as well that would be directing this. So that's the option with the note taking, right? Pen and paper. I have this template sheet and then voice recording. And then the main thing with opening up feedback space is really centering constructive criticism over destructive criticism. And the big difference between both is just the way in which the comments are going to be delivered by your audience. So how do you do that? How do you navigate that? Well, I rely, and I've used this technique before, this process called critical response process, which is Liz Lerman's theory process that she created. And she actually, she is a dance scholar. She is a choreographer, very well-known choreographer. She, I believe, is currently teaching at Arizona State University. She came out with this book in 2003. She published this book. And one of her definitions of critical response process is it combines the power of questions with the focus and challenge of informed dialogue. So you don't want to just create let's have a conversation, right? Because sometimes we're human. We tend to kind of go off on tangents and then get ideas. And also if you have a lot of creatives in this space, it could kind of just flow out with a lot of messaging, a lot of words. And then you're kind of left with what do I do with all this information, right? So you kind of want to create a streamline, a process, a step process to guide yourself with informed conversations. So the process offers makers, it would be you all, the active role in their critique of their own work. It gives makers a way to rehearse the connections they seek when art meets audience and the product meets its purpose. So in essence, she's saying also the creators, the makers, you all, it's also allowing for you all to not just take a step back, take the seat and have the audience do the work in the feedback process. It's actually asking you to engage. And this is how you would be engaging. So step one in CRP is statements of meanings. Responders state what was meaningful, evocative, interesting, exciting, and or striking in the work they have just witnessed. In essence, you want to start with opening up the space to what worked. Thank you all, we just want to open up the space. What, if I could hear from a couple of you all, what worked in the space, in the piece for you all, or what did you find evocative, or what did you find striking? What stood out to you? Did it evoke certain feelings? Would love to hear from you all. So you really are setting the foundation for a positive feedback environment where you're really, being intentional with the way that you ask, can you share exciting, evocative, interesting, and or striking comments or, sharings with us. So that really sets it up so that, if there were things that could maybe be perceived as negative or whatnot, we could leave those for later. But first we want to start off with what worked, right? Again, at this point, make sure that you're writing down what worked. You don't have to write full out, what every person is saying word to word, but just for the person that's taking notes, just being sure that you write sort of the spark notes of it, right? The main words that stood out. Also want to mention, should have mentioned this earlier, but within your collective, within your group, day of showing or before, ideally, you would want to choose whoever wants to be the note taker. So, or you can volunteer yourself, whoever feels comfortable in taking notes. You can also type them out, whatever works for you. So yeah, so make sure that that person's already designated ahead of time, because once we're in step one, you already have someone that's, taking the notes, as well as the facilitator. There's the thing about working as a small collective. Let's pretend like we're like a grassroots dance company, right? Like or a theater group. That's just sort of like you're having to wear multiple hats. So you just finished performing this piece and you're like out of breath and you're like, okay, thank you everyone. So now we're going to open up the space, so in the ideal world, you would have, you would be the part of the artist, and then a third person would be facilitating. But this is what, it's like in a lot of the realities as being artists out in the field. So somebody might be the performing artist and also the facilitator in this feedback process. Step 2, artists ask questioners. The artist asks questions about the work. In answering, responders stay on topic with the question and may express opinions in direct response to the artist's questions. So this is the section in which we're not passive as the art makers, dance makers. We are actually prepared with, let's say, 3 questions. And if you refer back to the CRP feedback sheet, you will see that I've listed out like feedback questions, and I listed 1, 2, and 3, and there you would type in your questions so that once whoever's, taking notes will open up, would already be on that question number 1, ready to just, insert the answers from whatever the audience is feeding back to you. So these are questions that should have already come up for you as you've been in your process. And so right now you still have the time to gather with your group and just ask, like, maybe there's like that certain section, you're like, is this really working? Like, will people get it? Also, it's subjective, everyone has their own way of like viewing dance and perceiving, right? But, or like, should this part be here or should be in the end? So, let's say an example would be you don't know if the piece should begin with a lot of energy in this, like in the very beginning, or it should stay, or should, start a certain, maybe more like a dark lighting, softer sounds, very slow movement, right? So being intentional with the question, like, what in the beginning of the piece, this would be the question, in the beginning of the piece, what was it that you think could have maybe been done different? Or do you think that you felt very lost in that certain part of the piece? So kind of like reversing it so that you're kind of, what your question is, but you want to open it up to the audience to see what they respond, right? So I hope that's helpful. Just making sure that you set up questions so that you are being fed what you really need, right, out of this CRP process. So step 3 would be neutral questions. Responders ask neutral questions about the work and the artist's response. Questions are neutral when they don't have an opinion couched on them. So now we did opening it up with positive, feedback. Second would be artists ask the questions. Third would be the neutral questions. So this is more for the audience members. As a facilitator, one of you all, you could use this right here, this slide itself, to share, and this quoted section, which is from Liz Lerman's CRP, you can share this part to them. And then just if they've never done CRP, you can just say, if you can just come from any questions that you're having or any like opinions that you're having, come from them from a space of curiosity, right? So like there's a certain section that, or an example, there's a certain section that kind of really turned me off, or that like I didn't like, or that I was just kind of, some like negative feelings were arising, right? And instead of, as a feedback audience member, instead of saying like, well, I didn't like this, instead of saying that, and this is for you as students, on the other end, also, if you ever go and watch any work, you could rephrase it and shift it in the form of a curious question, which would be, I wonder if instead of this dancer having done that, I wonder what it would have been if she chose not to. And then that would have been like, oh, yeah, maybe the art maker, you as the dancer, the choreographer, performer, like maybe didn't think about that. And also the audience member is also really approaching it from a place of possibility, right? So it's not just like, I didn't like that, because that doesn't produce anything. That's not constructive. It's not constructing something. It's not building up the work that you've been working on, right? So that would be a very helpful tool. So just step 3, curiosity. Just think about it that way. And then step 4 is opinion time. So responders state opinions given permission from the artist. The artist has the option to say no. So this one is a great learning tool for you as an artist and also as an audience member to learn about boundaries in the art making process. So the creative process, you've probably already seen yourself working with your colleagues in your collective and understanding like where a certain artist is willing to go or what they're willing to do and not do. And so same works for the feedback process. So you want to make sure that just how we set the container, you all set the container from the beginning when you started sharing stories, lived experiences to create a narrative for your piece. You want to kind of do the same, you as an artist is opening up yourself to receive feedback. And that's a very, very vulnerable space already. It's kind of like you do it and you're like, what did you think? And so it's important that you also have the power, the agency is the right word, agency to say no. So as the audience member, make sure you also share this with your audience saying like, if you want to share an opinion, make sure you ask first, like, is it okay if I share an opinion about this section that I thought about, in the piece? And so you're opening up the space and making sure that you are, again, protecting and keeping the container safe for both you all as the artists and the audience members as well. And again, coming from a place of curiosity for your audience members, the facilitator in this feedback session, again, I would suggest to you that you would use step 4, this quoted section, to just kind of like lay out that as a rule as well, that sharing opinions, are very subjective. We can have 1,000 opinions for one section that we saw, so different opinions. So just making sure that you ask your audience members to always, again, come from a place of curiosity, but also being honest. There's an appreciation that also comes with being honest. And last but not least, an asterisk, take notes, continue to take these notes. Again, you go back to the feedback sheet, you'll find that there's also a section for just this note taking. So you've gathered all of this. So the showing, you finished that section. Step 4, you thank your colleagues, your audience members for coming. Thank you all so much. This is valuable information that we'll take in and continue to work on the piece, right? So you have all this information. You can obviously, again, here I've attached the CRP feedback sheet. And then also again, in my process, journal a lot because it just kind of helps me clear out my thoughts of like, what did it feel to receive that feedback? And just processing that in and of itself. And the best part too is that you work in a collective, so you actually have each other to process that. So you can also do a check-in session with just it could be, I would say, the next day or another time, not the same day, because it'll probably be a very long day that day, but maybe 45 minutes or 30 minutes. 30 minutes is a little short, but maybe 45 minutes to be like, okay, What did you all feel? How did you feel in that run through? Because I think it's also important that like the feedback that you're getting from your audience, I'm sure there's also feedback from each other, you know, in having done a full run through. And then I will include in this part to say that I had mentioned earlier in one of the workshops that to not marry the work that you're doing, right? So there are certain things that you're like, I really want this part to be here, and I'm married to it, quote unquote, you know, just for lack of a better term, but I'm committed to it, and I don't want to let that go. But then there are certain sections that maybe like, okay, I can let that go. Compromise. It's not just, you know, one person working on this piece, and start editing from there. You know, a lot of what this feedback is going to do is going to it could either help you to elaborate a certain section more or to cut down a certain section more. You might even realize that you probably have a lot more material. Sometimes, most of the times, it's always cutting down than adding. We tend to create a lot more material than what we'll actually put on stage. So just being fluid with that, of the letting go as well. So making the cut is just getting specific with the editing part of it, right? So there's also parts in the piece that you thought were working, but then like once the audience saw it, then you realize like, oh, that didn't work. And then this also kind of gets finicky or interesting in art making, because art is so subjective, right? So I would ask you to ask yourself, like, how much is it important for me that the audience gets this specific message? And if in the feedback they didn't, you know, you didn't hear anyone actually point that out, then like, okay, what can I tweak? What can I shift to give that message, you know, more straightforward in a sense? I don't know if you've heard in the theater, like on the nose, sometimes some things are like a little bit too on the nose, which means like it's too literal, it's too like obvious, you know. And the fun part about art making is that sometimes you don't need to be so obvious about those things, and that sometimes there's freedom in knowing that if the audience gets it, they get it, and if they don't, they don't. But that's the beauty of it too, right? So embracing that the freedom of not needing it to be understood but by the audience, but that it evoked questions, which I think is key. I always find myself walking away from theater work, dance work, that I might not have understood maybe what the piece was about, but if it made me question certain things about like how I relate to things or in my life, then I'm like, I think they obviously influenced me in my thinking and my feeling in some way. So that's really important. So we're on to music. So this is the really hard part about being a dance maker, specifically a dance maker, and also theater maker. I mean, and also when we don't truly have like a budget to work with, and you know, we can get creative though. I think the biggest tools that we may have, assets that we have are like in our friendships with our colleagues, like, that are multi-talented, that you know, can bring something to the table. Maybe they have siblings that play a violin or play drums or something, and you're able to invite them to collaborate for this. There is royalty-free music and copyright-free music out there. The only thing is that as you start to navigate this, just know that even though you can read like royalty-free music and copyright-free music, it's actually still not free. You still have to get it licensed, and that costs money. So I'm just kind of trying to save you time in case you want to try to go that route. And there's a good blog about this on Soundstripe, which actually does licensing for music, but they've done a really good job at creating a blog to kind of let you know, like, hey, this is how it goes in the realm of trying to obtain music to use for your artwork, your dance making work, right? As I don't know if you all know, but you know, any music that you were to use, even if it's for like a short video or just for educative purposes, you know, you always have to say, I do not own the rights to this music for education purposes only. Just to make sure that you're also acknowledging that you're not trying to use the music or to copyright it or to, you know, jump over any legalities. So I would love to know where you are with your music as well. Please email me. I would love to. I will also be in touch with your teacher soon to talk about that. I'm definitely wondering where you all are with your using your music. And if you don't know already, in the editing portion of this, GarageBand is my go-to. It is on your Apple PC. Haven't worked with anything else outside of Apple, but there's also Songmark, and Songmark is an app. It's only for iOS, so I think it's specifically for the iPad. That one is cool because it actually kind of helps you play with once you have your recording, it kind of helps you play with the sound of it, of the music. It also helps you like with the speed of it and kind of like the post editing things. So now we go into the text. So feedback, music, text in the work. You have choices to do spoken word, expressing yourself in like poetry, memorize poetry, memorize writing, visual text. You could use a projector. That is something, I don't know if it's applied by your school or if you have a projector, personal projector that you're willing to share for this project. Projectors are kind of obtainable nowadays to get. Also a great software for projectors is PowerPoint or Keynote. PowerPoint is just super easy, kind of, you know, if you just want to do like even just like an actual word. When you're using projection though, it does mean that you're going to need an extra person to set up the cues for projection, right? To be able to cue that up with a piece. So take note of that. Artist choice is just taking creative choices with the ways you choose your text. I mean, that's the fascinating thing about making art, right? You can even like play with, you know, like doing something like this, like showing a piece of paper and maybe it's like handwriting, or in real time, you set up like a long strip of butcher paper and someone's like drawing, painting as the piece is happening at the same time. And then like you lift up and there's text on there. There's so many creative ways to use text. So we're on to step 5. And so step 5 just points out again, is your music ready for your performance? Who do you have queued up to be giving the breath cues? So breath cues are basically, maybe I'm sure you've all have worked with breath cues, and if you haven't, it's just let's say you're in the piece and you know that you need a specific, just a cue to get you moving to the next part, and it's literally just the cue that goes like just like that. And just with that cue, you can hear it on stage. If you very much as an artist, you've developed that kind of sensory, right, to be with your colleagues, connected with your colleagues, even though there's sound and stuff going on. So somebody would be doing that breath cue. And then making sure that your video is set up for your final recording that you're doing. Tripod stand, you know, sometimes you do the good old like cup or something, but I want to stay away from that. I want to make sure that maybe you all can get a good setup for where you're going to have your camera, and it makes sure that it captures your full range, right, of where you would be, and it actually captures just the actual space you'll be using, not anything, not showing your dancers kind of, you know, standby on the sides, on the wings, per se, but just make sure that it captures the frame is just the frame of the stage, right? The performance stage. Again, we're into cues. That's mainly the main thing. This is sort of more the technical part as we get towards the end. It's just like making sure that that you have multiple people wearing multiple hats. Ideally, in the theater world, we have the stage manager who's in charge of, setting up all the communication lines, from the lighting to the technical arrangements on the stage, facilitating, overseeing the props, the calls. And in this case, I am asking you all, and I'm sure maybe you're already on it, to be proactive with your role as the artist, collective team member, and sort of stage tech, you would say, or manager, in this case, to be able to support each other as you're trying to, manage this small production in essence. So I've actually set up a lighting cues sheet for you here. And in the lighting cues, it's fairly simple what I've done, but I've shown you, like, you do the opening Q1, Q2, and then let's say however many cues you have, right? After that, then you'll do, like, there's a certain piece in the part, like so-and-so stops, and then that's Q3, Q4. So you're doing like an analog of like the sequencing of the piece from opening to end, but the cues should stay from 1, keep going, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They shouldn't go from like opening 1, 2, and 3, middle 1, 2, and 3. You want to have the sequencing numerically, just so that like, okay, I have 10 cues in the piece, or we have 15 cues in the piece, and Q5 is so and so that you're just clear. When you're being told to go to Q2, you know what Q2 is, right? And then there's no multiple Q2s. There's only one Q2. I hope that that makes sense. But again, I am just an email away, and I'm more than happy to help y'all with the cue set list. So the final run through / dress rehearsal. Again, set up a date and time. Want to have this final showing, and this is the final phase of your work. Invite your close colleagues, mentors, friends, people that you in essence feel comfortable with, showing them your finalized work. This final role will include full costumes, lighting, and any projection sound that you may need. So like I guess professionally, when you're performing or touring with a company, you usually have tech rehearsal, dress rehearsal, and then you have show day, right? So the dress and tech would be, you're doing dress rehearsal and tech rehearsal at the same time. And then inside of that, you'll have a full run through. So for you all, in your case, you would use your studio space, your classroom space, to do the full run through and dress. So if you all have the energy to do a full run through without your audience members, maybe an hour before they come in, and then do the full run through for a second time. Personally, I actually like the way that works. I feel like I kind of need just one good full run through to kind of get my feet wet per se, or my feet warmed, really, my body going. And then the second time around, I just feel like, okay, I got the flow of it the first time. And then by the second time, it's the actual full run through. So I believe we have reached the end of workshop number 3. Again, I would love to hear any questions, any comments, anything that you find yourself maybe wondering about during the end of the process, but also prior, any other things that have come up for you. So I hope you found this helpful, and thank you all so much for joining me.